California, the most populated state in the United States, is undergoing a surge in COVID-19 cases, prompting the governor to issue a regional stay-at-home order. Hello and a very warm welcome to WION-VOA Co-production, our weekly special and collaboration with Voice of America for all the latest stories from United States. I'm Akanksha Swaroop. Now, many businesses in the US are fighting back the coronavirus pandemic, saying the lockdown is unfair. VOA's Elizabeth Lee reports from Los Angeles.
Signs are everywhere that life in California is again under lockdown. Either by state or local mandate, some of California's most populated regions are under a stay-at-home order, this time through the Christmas holiday.
It's not about me, it's about them. I feel bad for them.
Under the new order, restaurants must close their outdoor dining area and only serve delivery and takeout orders. Some restaurant owners are saying no.
We're not going to abide by those orders. We cannot survive with takeout and delivery alone because we're giving 30 cents on every dollar through delivery up to the Silicon Valley apps.
Many small business owners say this stay-at-home order is unfair. Retail stores can still operate indoors at 20% capacity, and the entertainment industry can continue. But nail and hair salons cannot. Barber Lou Garcia Reynoso received training to maintain a sanitary space and had complied with 2 shutdown orders since March, but not this time.
It's not because we don't think it's real. We want to take all the necessary precautions. We want to do all of those things. But when we see big business continuing to be able to work, even though their people don't have the training that we do, it makes it a little bit difficult for us to continue to comply.
Some business owners say it's also hard to follow orders from Governor Gavin Newsom when in November he attended a birthday dinner with a group of people after telling Californians not to have large gatherings.
People who are writing the rules are breaking them themselves, and that tells us 2 things. Number 1, that they don't care about us, and or number 2, that they don't care about the rules or that things aren't serious enough for them to feel as if they should be following the rules.
Well, I want to apologize to you because I need to preach and practice, not just preach and not practice.
The California governor says the sharp increase in hospitalizations, stretching resources, is the reason why so many Californians need to stay home. California's stay-at-home mandate lasts at least 3 weeks and begins in any of the 5 regions in the state when hospital intensive care unit capacity drops below 15%.
The problem is we don't have enough staff to take care of everyone. And that's really when things get dangerous in a hospital, is when we don't have enough staff to care for everyone who is very ill.
As small businesses anticipate the economic fallout from the lockdown, doctors are bracing for what the Christmas holiday will bring. Governor Newsom says he does not anticipate another wave of COVID to hit the state because vaccines are on the way. Elizabeth Lee, VOA News, Los Angeles.
What's the COVID situation like on ground zero in the US? For that, let's quickly go across to Voice of America's Nova Parvati, who's joining us live from Washington, D.C. Hey, Nova, hope you're doing good.
Good evening, Akanksha.
Nova, the pandemic continues to wreak havoc in the US, but the country seems to be just on track to begin COVID vaccinations as early as next week. What's the status now as far as tackling the pandemic is concerned?
Well, as you can see behind me, this is usually a busy restaurant area. It's still morning in Washington, D.C., but you can see that restaurants here, like in many parts of the country, have pretty much done all they can to maximize their business. You see the tree behind me, which has been dubbed the Kamala tree in honor of the incoming Vice President-elect. That is on the bike lane, what's normally the bike lane. And so a lot of restaurants in Washington, D.C. and also other cities are doing all they can to maximize their earnings. In Washington, D.C., outdoor dining is still permitted, while indoor dining is capped to a capacity of 25%. It used to be 50% before COVID numbers increased again. As we saw in the earlier report, in Los Angeles County, outdoor dining is even not allowed anymore. And this is also the case in Baltimore, Maryland, which is only an hour's drive from Washington, D.C. So clearly a concern among local officials and also health experts as it gets colder. I'm dressing very differently from how I usually report, because it's 4 degrees Celsius or so around here right now. So, this was expected. Cold weather, people staying indoors, more COVID cases. Now, as you mentioned, the good news is the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, has cleared, at least its panel has cleared the use of the Pfizer vaccine, which means up to 2.9 million doses could be shipped across the U.S. within 24 hours. Around 175,000 doses are expected in New York this weekend alone. That is the former epicenter of the pandemic. And also a state which is seeing increased numbers and wants to begin to turn the tide. Around 327,000 doses will go to California, the most populous state. And if we look at the lockdowns in Los Angeles County has a population of 10 million people, more than the population of individual 41 states in the U.S. So that's why there's such concern over there and that's why the measures are so drastic there, Akansha.
Also going to get more tense now with winter arriving, as we can see you're all clad in woolens and we don't mind you piling on more woolens. Having said that, Nova, what is the approach now being taken by the incoming Biden administration, and are they coordinating with the outgoing Trump administration at all?
Well, of course, President Trump is celebrating the developments in vaccines. On Tuesday, he held a summit of Operation Warp Speed, which is the federal initiative to fast-pace the development of COVID vaccines. And of course, as we know, what usually takes several years has now taken months, if not a better part of the year. He had that summit in the White House, but did not invite the Biden transition team. Nor has earlier on in the transition has he been cooperative in sharing COVID information, even though intelligence information, for instance, President-elect Biden has been able to get access to those via Kamala Harris, who is a sitting senator. But a lot of these, but of course the transition process was signed off on very recently, 2 weeks ago. So they have been coordinating or at least sharing COVID information, just this lack of direct communication. But at the same time, during the Operation Warp Speed Summit, President-elect Biden held his own press conference where he unveiled his own team, which were charged with health issues, including the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Javier Becerra, currently the Attorney General of California. And also, spelling out his approach once he's sworn into office on January 20th. A national mask mandate, which now doesn't currently exist, and also listening to scientists, and also his goal of having at least 100 doses of vaccinations for Americans within his 100 days in office. Now, he says within his 100 first days, COVID won't be over. But at least they can start to turn the tide, including in the mandate to wear masks. Now, before I reported to you, of course, I had to wear my mask here. And that is the mandate in cities like Washington, D.C. Right. But not all cities and not all states use it. And people liken this to being in one big pool, because America is one contiguous state like India, but allowing each part of the pool to to do whatever they please, Akansha.
Right. Having said that, let's hope that things get better in the United States once Joe Biden comes to power. Having said that, we'll be talking a lot more about the transition of his team and what the expectations are, but just in a bit. Now, after 4 years of President Trump's America First policy, President-elect Joe Biden says his administration will reassert the nation's historic role as a global leader. Expectations at the United Nations are also high that the United States will re-engage at the world body. Voice of America's correspondent Margaret Bashir reports on this story.
When he introduced his top national security and foreign policy officials last month, President-elect Joe Biden said they reflect that America is back.
Ready to lead the world, not retreat from it. Once again, sit at the head of the table. Ready to confront our adversaries and not reject our allies. Ready to stand up for our values.
At the United Nations, the Trump administration has slashed hundreds of millions of dollars in funding to programs, including peacekeeping missions, Palestinian refugees, and for women's reproductive health. It pulled out of UN agencies like the World Health Organization and quit a major accord on climate action. Biden could win some international goodwill by quickly undoing some of Trump's policies. Experts say UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres will likely have more latitude with the new U.S. administration.
I think we're going to see Guterres laying out some pretty ambitious plans in the year ahead on how to fight climate change and how to fight inequality, because in a sense he's liberated to promote ambitious ideas for international cooperation after a period in which he had to be enormously cautious to avoid offending Trump.
Biden's nominee to be UN ambassador and member of his cabinet is career diplomat Linda Thomas Greenfield.
America is back. Multilateralism is back. Diplomacy is back.
At the United Nations, China moved to expand its influence as the Trump administration pulled back.
Biden, I think, will want to limit Chinese influence, but does know that in some ways it's necessary to work with Beijing.
Both allies and adversaries are eager to see how Biden and his UN envoy will translate this new U.S. leadership at the United Nations. Margaret Bashir, VOA News, New York.
Let's go back to Nova Parvadi for more on Joe Biden's policies and what they will be like. Nova, America is back seems to be the foreign policy slogan for the incoming administration. What kind of new engagement can we see in the future Biden administration?
Well, the Biden administration, many analysts see, is going to be sort of a continuation of the Obama administration in terms of the approach to foreign policy, relying on allies, including from NATO, and also other allies in Asia like South Korea and Japan, and not rocking the boat too much in terms of relationships with these allies, and also getting tough on countries like North Korea, which during the Trump administration got a lot of overtures, at least to its leadership, with the 3 summits between President Trump and Kim Jong-un, but also very little progress in terms of denuclearization negotiations. Now, this is also a difference in approach because President Trump tends to emphasize personal relations with foreign leaders and more of a traditional sort of on-the-ground approach among lower officials on the ground, so that it relies on the usual machinery of diplomacy instead of top-to-top communication, and also a lot more certainty, perhaps, with the Biden administration in terms of no major differences. But also we can see some continuity as well. China, the rise of China, is something that is being responded to pretty much the same across party lines. The fear of a super surveillance state, and also a state which has territorial ambitions both in South Asia and also in the South China Sea, those are things that are going to be a challenge for President-elect Biden's incoming administration. But we're also more likely to see the usual engagement with allies and also with other nations instead of the mere confrontation and America first, which a lot of times ends up being America alone, Akansha.
Absolutely. Quite a sharp contrast between the Trump administration over there and the Biden administration. But Nova, in terms of military policy overseas, what can we expect from Joe Biden's administration?
Well, the interesting thing is one of the first things that was on the agenda in terms of the military. We remember during the campaign in 2016 that President Trump called NATO obsolete, although after he came into office, he said it's no longer obsolete. Now that is the bedrock of U.S. Security policy overseas is NATO, and that has undergone quite a shift during the past 4 years. But what has resulted from that shift has been an increase of spending by NATO allies to 2% of GDP as agreed upon. And this is something that the Trump administration, you have to admit, has managed to make a reality with countries, with member states chipping in more as demanded by President Trump. Whether this continues under the Biden administration, we don't know. But what we do know is there's going to be a less confrontational approach to NATO allies. And whether this gets the same results as the Trump administration, we have yet to know. One aspect of that is the withdrawal of thousands of soldiers from Germany, because Germany is considered to be one of the countries that are delinquent in paying up the 2% of GDP national security budget that is demanded by the U.S. administration under Donald Trump. But whether it seems that an incoming Biden administration would more likely reverse that decision and not pull out troops. And also in South Korea, the relations in the past 4 years have been dogged by haggling over the cost of keeping U.S. soldiers there. And perhaps now it can focus more on containing North Korea instead of being tested every time with the issue of payment and cost and how much, who's going to pay for whom. So this is the kind of, and also in India, the defense pact is not likely to be overturned or in any way lessened, but the U.S. will definitely continue to support countries like India, including with the defense pact that was signed right before the election. Just that this time it will be going through maybe more regular diplomatic channels rather than more spectacular summits between leaders, Akansha.
I can certainly tell you, Nova, that the Indian administration is expecting precisely that. Having said that, thank you so much, Nova Purwadi, for joining us live from Washington, D.C. and sharing in your precious inputs. We'll see you soon next week, same time. All of us have different hobbies. Some of us like to collect coins, numismatists. Others like to collect stamps, a philatelist. But there are some who like to treasure time by collecting clocks. You can call them a clockman or a real-time keeper. Here's more. A mystique related to time and eternity, treasured as heirlooms. Clocks have been a popular collector's item for at least 400 years. Pham Van Thuoc has scoured Europe in search of historical church clocks. He then brings them back to his home in Vietnam and restores them. Each of his displays tell a story. Thuoc has over 20 church clocks, with the oldest clock dating back to the year 1750 and the heaviest weighing almost a ton. Thok not only enjoys the hunt to find antique clocks, but also loves to repair them so that they can start ticking again.
I think it is very meaningful because once a tick-tock has sounded, you can never get back the second that has passed. It is a reminder of how valuable time is, and that I should treasure every minute and second.
Time and tide wait for none. Tracing his passion back to hearing the chimes of bells from clock towers when he was a boy, Thok is preserving a sliver of vanishing history. A real timekeeper, safeguarding the treasures lost in time. Bureau Report, WION World is One. Here's another interesting one. As the year wraps up, listicles summarizing the year are back in business. The latest one is the most mispronounced words of 2020, and it has some of the most famous people on planet as its top contenders. US Vice President-elect Kamala Harris and US health expert Anthony Fauci joined Renaissance master painter Leonardo da Vinci on top of this year's list of most mispronounced words. Others include Bangtan Sonyeondan, the full name of South Korean boy band BTS, and Isaias, the most powerful hurricane that caused a lot of damage to the East Coast and the Caribbean this year. The list is compiled by a US captioning company and identifies the words that proved the most challenging for news readers, including me, and people on television to pronounce this year. The list, unsurprisingly, reflects a year dominated by the presidential election and the coronavirus pandemic. Speaking of the coronavirus, medical workers have been the real heroes of 2020. Across the world, people have found innovative ways of appreciating their work. In Mexico, a group of students got together to pay their respects. They did so by painting a 100-meter-long mural in the national capital. Our next report brings you more.
Just a few more strokes. And this gigantic mural will be complete. A 100-meter-long artwork in Mexico City. No doubt it's a great art project. But beyond that, it's a tribute to Mexico's hundreds of doctors and nurses. The country's bulwark against the coronavirus pandemic.
This is just one small way of honoring the work they are doing and of thanking them. It only remains to thank them because they are risking their body, their life and their health to keep others alive.
Y la vida y su salud para mantener la vida de otras personas.
This mural is the work of students at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. It adorns the facade of a nursing school in the national capital. Completing this mural was no easy task. More than 100 students were involved. They broke up into small teams and turned up day after day, completing a small portion of the work with each trip. And their efforts are being appreciated.
Es como la proyección de uno como enfermero.
I don't know, I can't explain it. It's beautiful. You pass by and you have this feeling. I could have been there looking after that person in labor, receiving that baby, looking after that person. It's something you can't explain. It's a beautiful feeling.
Ahí atendiendo este parto, recibiendo este bebé, cuidando a esa persona, o sea, es como algo inexplicable, la verdad, se siente lindo.
2020 has been a horrible year for medical workers. They've spent most of it at hospitals, caring for COVID-19 patients. Tributes like this one are a way of saying thank you for all your work. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
And with that, it's a wrap of this newscast. Thank you so much for watching. News and updates continue on World is One.